So this is the lesson for 7-1, graphing inequalities. What you're going to be doing is graphing a linear inequality on the coordinate plane. Now, these questions are just like graphing lines from the previous chapter, except there's two more steps that you have to do. All right. Notice that you still have the equation in the y equals form, but you don't have an equal sign. You're going to have an inequality sign, whether it's less than, greater than, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. You're going to graph them just like you do a normal line. So you're going to have it in the form y equals, except again, you won't have an equal sign. Your number in front of your x is your slope. Remember that slope is always written as a fraction. The top number is how many you go up or down. Up if it is positive, down if it is negative. And then the bottom number is how many you go over to the right. Remember, you always go over to the right. Your plus b, your plus or minus whatever, all right, your plus b, your plus or minus whatever, is your y-intercept. Your y-intercept, remember, is always written 0, comma, whatever your plus or minus is. If this was a plus 5, we'd write a positive 5 here. If this was a minus 5, we'd write a negative 5 here. And that point is the point where you start your graph at. All right, that point is where you start your graph at. Now, you do have two other decisions that you have to do. You're graphing these just like a normal line, but you're either going to use a dotted line to connect the dots or a solid line. You're going to use a dotted line when it's less than or greater than. A dotted line just looks like a dotted line, all right? Like a dashed line almost. It does not include the points on the line. Less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, you're going to use a solid line to connect the dots. And that does include the points that are on the line. That's going to be important later on in the chapter. Shading. You're not only going to have to decide whether you do a dotted versus solid line, but you're also going to have to shade. You're either going to shade below the line or above the line because these are inequalities, your answers or solutions in later on in the chapter are going to include a multitude of points. So you have to shade. You're going to shade below the line if it's less than or equal to. You're going to shade above the line if it's greater than or equal to. So this is a very important slide to remember. Dotted versus solid. A little way to remember that it's solid. You see the picture of the solid line right here for the or equal to. So since you have to have the picture of the solid line there, you're going to draw a solid line. Shading below or above. If you think about it, it really makes sense. Less than is down below, greater than is up above. So that's sort of a way to remember it. So let's take a look at what one of these questions look like. So we have y is less than 3x minus 1. Remember your slope. Your slope is the number that is in front of your x. Slope is always written as a fraction. So 3 as a fraction is just 3 over 1. So this is really up 3 over 1. And where are we going to start out at? We're going to start out at the y-intercept. Y-intercept is always 0, comma, whatever your plus or minus is. So this one is 0, comma, negative 1. This is where we are starting at. So we're going to start off at 0, negative 1. Now remember, your first point is always somewhere on that y-axis because that's all 0, comma, whatever this is, all right? So we're going to start off at 0, comma, negative 1. We're going to start off right here. Whoops, sorry. This is where we are starting off at 0, comma, negative 1. That's our first point. And now we're going to follow our slope. We're going to follow our slope by starting here at the blue dot. We're going to go up 3, 1, 2, 3 over 1. And if my board would work, we're going to go up 3 over 1 and put a dot. up 3 over 1, and put a dot. Now, before you go and connect the dots, you have two decisions to make. You have to decide whether you're going to use a dotted or solid line to connect the dots. Our inequality symbol is just less than. Just less than is going to be a dotted line. You only use solid if you see the picture of the solid line for the or equal to. So we're going to connect the dots using a dotted line, and then we have to shade above or below. We have the inequality sign of less than. Less than is down below. So we're going to use a dotted line to connect the dots. Make sure you put arrows on your lines. And then we are going to shade below the line. Now, below the line, think about the line as like a hill, all right? We're going to shade below the ground. So if this is a hill, this would be, I'm a terrible artist, but this would be like a person walking down or walking up the hill, all right? So below the hill would be all in this area down here. Now, in class kick, you could either draw it like I did and shade like I did like that, or if you want to use the highlighting tool and shade below like that, right? This inequality includes all the points that are below that line. You really should label your line as well. So we're just going to stick it down there. And that is one complete question today. I know if you didn't understand it, we got a bunch more examples. Here is the next one. So in this next one, we have y is greater than or equal to negative x plus 4. Now, anytime that you have a letter all by itself, there's really a 1 in front of it. So there's really a 1 in front of that x, or a negative 1 actually. We want to write that as a fraction because slope, your m, is always written as a fraction. So your slope is going to be negative 1 over 1. What that really means, because it's negative, that really means down 1 and over 1. Your y-intercept. Your y-intercept is your plus or minus. So it's 0, 4. That's the number that we're starting off at. So we're starting off at 0, 4. Remember that that first dot is always somewhere on that y-axis. So 0, 4 is right here, over 0 up to 4. And now we're going to follow our slope starting at that dot. We're going to go down 1 over 1. So down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1, down 1 over 1. But now you have two decisions to make. Is it a dotted or a solid line? Well, because you see the picture of the or equal to symbol, that or equal to symbol means that it is a solid line. So I'm going to connect the dots using a solid line this time. That includes all the dots that are on that line. I'm going to label it right away. And now I have to decide, am I going to shade above or below? We have greater than. Greater than is up above. Less than is down below. Greater than is up above, so we are going to shade above the line. Again, think of this as a hill. If I would draw a person walking down the hill, there's my person. Up above the hill would be all up in here. This is up above. So we're shading above the line. Let me do another one for you. Let's take a look at this one. Y is greater than 1/2 x. So our slope is the number that's in front of our x. So our slope is 1/2. Don't change it to a decimal. Just leave it as a fraction. Slope is always written as a fraction. This really means up 1 over 2. The y-intercept. Now our y-intercept is always written 0, whatever your plus or minus is. There is no plus or minus after the x. Technically, we could add a plus 0 there and it wouldn't change anything because adding 0 to something doesn't change it. So really this is 0, 0 because it's plus or minus 0. So this is where we are starting at. So this time we're starting our line, our inequality graph at 0, 0. Now we want to follow that pattern going up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2, put a dot. Up 1 over 2, put a dot. Up 1 over 2, put a dot. Now you have your decisions to make, dotted or solid. We don't see a picture of a solid line, so it has to be a dotted line. It's only solid when you have or equal to. So dotted, we're going to connect the dots using a dotted or a dashed line. Make sure you put arrows on the ends. Shading above it or below it, we have greater than. Greater than is up above the line. So we're going to shade all up in here. And unfortunately, my board doesn't like that part right there. So we're going to shade up above. All right, we're going to shade up above the line. Again, you should label your line as well, just by writing in what the original equation was. Take a look at another one. This one says y is less than or equal to negative 1/3 x plus 5. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Give you about 1 minute to do it. Our slope is the number that is in front of the x. So our slope is this number, negative 1/3. That really means down 1 over 3. Again, don't change it to a decimal. Slope is always written as a fraction. Our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is 0, comma, whatever your plus or minus is. So we have 0, comma, 5. Remember, that first dot is always somewhere on your y-axis. So 0, comma 5 is right here, over 0 up to 5. Starting there, right, this is where we start. Starting there, you're going to go down 1 over 3. So starting there, down 1 over 3, put a dot. Down 1 over 3, put a dot. Remember, we always go over to the right. Now you have to decide, dotted or solid line. You see the picture of the solid line right there for the or equal to symbol, so it's going to be a solid line. Connect the dots using a solid line like that. Make sure you have your arrows on the ends. Shading above it or below it, we have less than. Less than is down below. So we're going to shade down in here. Right? Always make sure that you label your line as well. Questions on that one? Go ahead and try this one, please. Just ignore the letter A there. This is y is greater than x plus 3. Go ahead and try this one, please. Now, the graph on this one, the grid, background grid is a little bit different. Lots of times on the Regents exams, they try and trick you a little bit by not counting, not labeling every single one. So that's why I wanted to show you this one. Go ahead and try this one, please. Again, one of the ways that they're also going to try and trick you on the Regents exam is not having all of this extra information for you to like spoon feed it to you. Slope, y-intercept, dotted or solid, shade above or below. They'll just tell you, graph this inequality. They expect you to know that you have to find those four things. So our slope is the number that's in front of our x. Anytime that you have a letter all by itself, there's really a 1 in front of it. So our slope is 1. But remember, we want to write it as a fraction. Anytime that you have an integer like that, whether it's positive or negative, we put it over 1 to make it into a fraction. So this is really up 1 over 1. Our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is always 0, comma, whatever your plus or minus is. So this one is 0, comma 3. That's where we are starting at. So starting at 0, 3, 0, 3 is right here in between the 2 and the 4. It doesn't label the 3, but that is where 3 is. We want to go up 1 over 1. So up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. We have to decide, is it dotted or solid? You don't see a picture of a solid line there, so this one has to be dotted. So we're going to do a dotted line to connect the dots. Some people call it a dashed line. I like to call it a dotted line. Make sure you put your arrows on the ends. We have greater than. Greater than is up above. So we want to shade above the line. Above the line would be up here. And then you should label your line as well. Questions on that one? All right, go ahead and try this one. Now, this one tries to trick you a little bit differently. Sometimes they will give you a fraction that has a negative sign that's right in front of the fraction bar. So when you go to find your slope, you might not know, well, where does that negative sign go to? Does the negative sign go to the 1, or does the negative sign go to the 4? Well, the negative sign goes to the top number all the time. So our slope here is really negative 1 over 4. That negative sign goes to the top number all the time. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please. So negative 1 over 4, that would really mean down 1 over 4. For our y-intercept, we'd be starting at 0, comma 3. So starting at 0, comma 3 right here, we would go down 1 over 4, down 1 over 4. We have to decide dotted line or solid line. You don't see a picture of a solid line, so this one has to be a dotted line. Make sure you put your arrows on the ends. Less than is shading below the line. So shading below the line would be down here where we are shading. Again, you should always label your line as well. Questions about this one? Now we get to the two sort of more complicated questions, the one that people screw up on all the time. We have horizontal lines and we have vertical lines. If you think back to a couple chapters ago, when we graphed vertical lines and horizontal lines, you have to remember the term hazy vixen. Hazy goes with horizontal, and vixen goes with vertical. That is an easy way to remember which one is which, when to do a horizontal line and when to do a vertical line. The H stands for horizontal. You are going to use that when you have a y equals equation. So anytime that you have y equals a number, it's going to be a horizontal line. Vixen, the V is for vertical, and the X is when you're going to have X equals. So when you have a y equals equation, you're going to have a horizontal line. Remember, horizontal is side to side. And remember that when you have an x equals equation, you're going to have a vertical line. That's what hazy vixen is, all right? To remind you which way the line is supposed to look. So when you go and do these, we have x is less than or equal to 2. So we're going to have a vertical line at 2. So we're going to have a vertical line right here. You still have to decide dotted or solid. You see the picture of the solid line. So we're going to have a solid line at x equals 2. Now, here's the complicated part, shading above or below. Well, this is the inequality symbol of less than. Less than is down below. Well, how the heck do you do below a vertical line? Well, instead of doing actually physically down, we want numbers that are less than 2. Well, where are the numbers less than 2? All the numbers that are less than 2 are over to this side. So you would shade to the left-hand side on this one. And again, you should always label your inequality. Let's take a look at the one below it. X is greater than 2. Again, you have an x equals equation. So remember hazy vixen, we're going to have a vertical line. So we're going to have a vertical line at 2 this time. Be careful, you don't have the or equal to. I was actually making that mistake. So you're going to have a dotted line here at x equals 2. And you are going to shade above this time. Above because you have greater than. So this time above is all the numbers that are bigger than 2. So it would be over to the right. Those two get a little bit confusing, but again, make sure that you're still identifying solid or dotted and shading above or below. In this case, below means numbers that are smaller than it, above means numbers that are greater than it. When we take a look at horizontal lines, we have y is less than 2. Again, this is going to be a dotted line because you don't have the or equal to, and we're going to shade below it. So you're going to have a horizontal line at y equals 2. Here's y equals 2. We're going to have our dotted line here at y equals 2, and we are going to shade below it. Here we have y is greater than or equal to 2. You see the or equal to, so that's going to be a solid line. Greater than is up above. So you're going to have a solid line this time at y equals 2. And you are going to shade above it. So again, remember hazy vixen. The H stands for horizontal, and that's when you have the y equals. The V stands for vixen, and that is going to be a vertical line for x equals. On these horizontal and vertical lines, you don't find the slope and you don't find a y-intercept, all right? Notice that the vertical lines don't even go through the y-axis, so you don't have a y-intercept. And your slope, we don't worry about. It's just going to be a horizontal or a vertical line, all right? So taking a look